Alright, there's another headline making the rounds online, and once again people are running with it as if it's established fact without stopping for even 2 seconds to ask whether the source has any credibility left. The story came from Los Hari, and honestly, at this point, I don't understand why so many creators still treat his reports like insider revelations when he has been consistently wrong throughout this entire BlakeLively and Ryan Reynolds saga. Every few weeks there's a new dramatic claim attached to anonymous insiders, mysterious Hollywood whispers, or sources close to the couple. And then later the story either quietly falls apart or directly contradicts facts that come out afterward. But because the headlines are dramatic and because people love celebrity collapse narratives, the internet keeps recycling the same claims over and over again. The latest angle being pushed is that Ryan Reynolds supposedly skipped appearing publicly with Blake because she has become too controversial, too polarizing, too damaging to his image. The story claims he deliberately avoided walking into the spotlight beside her because her reputation is now toxic. And immediately everyone started repeating it like it came straight from Ryan's inner circle. I don't buy it. Not for 1 second. The biggest reason is simple. The reporting itself doesn't even line up with the reality of how these two have operated publicly for years. People are trying to rewrite normal behavior into evidence of marital collapse because scandal sells better than nuance. Blake and Ryan have never attended every single event together. They've always had separate appearances, separate obligations, and separate professional branding. Blake has gone to fashion events alone countless times. Ryan has promoted projects without Blake standing beside him countless times. She has attended designer launches, premieres, fashion campaigns, and even major public appearances without him. He has done press tours, sports events, and promotional appearances without her. Yet suddenly now, because their reputations are under pressure, every separate appearance becomes proof their marriage is exploding. That's the narrative machine at work. People start with the conclusion first and then twist every ordinary action into evidence supporting it. Now, does that mean their marriage is perfectly healthy? No. Personally, I think there are enormous cracks underneath the surface. But those cracks aren't appearing because Ryan skipped one event or because Blake attended something without him. The problems are much deeper than that, and they've been building for a long time. When you spend years carefully constructing a celebrity image built around being the perfect witty Hollywood couple, eventually maintaining that image becomes exhausting. Ryan and Blake spent over a decade selling themselves as this untouchable power duo. Funny interviews, charming social media posts, coordinated appearances, inside jokes online, glamorous red carpets, perfect family branding. People bought into the fantasy because it was entertaining. But the problem with living inside a brand is that eventually reality starts colliding with the image. And once the public begins questioning the authenticity of that image, the entire structure starts wobbling. That's what's happening now. Their reputations are taking hits from multiple directions at once, and suddenly the carefully managed perception no longer feels stable. What makes the situation even worse is that both of them have enormous egos tied directly to public approval. These are not people who can casually shrug off backlash and disappear quietly for a few months. Their businesses, investments, endorsements, and professional relationships are deeply connected to how likable they appear to the public. That's why the lawsuits and controversies matter so much more than people realize. It's not just gossip. It's financial pressure. It's image pressure. It's career pressure. Every negative headline chips away at the value of the brands attached to their names. And I still believe this entire legal disaster was driven more by Ryan than by Blake. From the beginning, it felt like Ryan was operating behind the scenes trying to protect a business empire disguised as a celebrity marriage. People forget how much money is tied into reputation-based ventures. Ryan isn't just an actor anymore. He turned himself into a corporate personality. Mint Mobile, aviation gin, marketing ventures, sports ownership, production companies, investment deals. Everything relies on audiences liking him. The entire business model depends on Ryan Reynolds being viewed as clever, lovable, relatable, funny, and trustworthy. The second the public starts seeing him differently, the value of all those partnerships weakens. That's why image control became so aggressive. When the backlash around "It Ends With Us" started growing and criticism began landing directly on Blake and indirectly on Ryan, panic set in. Suddenly there was a real possibility that their carefully built public identities could collapse. And when people with massive egos feel cornered, they don't react calmly. They go into survival mode. That's exactly what this entire situation feels like. Survival mode disguised as confidence. Publicly they project calmness, strength, unity, and victory. Behind the scenes it looks much more chaotic. Lawsuits, PR maneuvering, reputational damage, fractured industry relationships, financial strain, that's not stability. That's a pressure cooker. One thing that keeps getting ignored is how many people around them have ended up dragged into legal chaos. The lawsuits didn't just affect Blake and Ryan. Agencies got involved. Lawyers got involved. Former associates got involved. Business relationships became messy. Public accusations spread everywhere. Multiple names were pulled into the storm. That doesn't happen when a situation is under control. That happens when emotions, ego, and damage control start escalating beyond reason. And once legal warfare becomes public, there's really no clean exit anymore. Even if settlements happen, even if official statements claim peace has been reached, the reputational scars remain. Hollywood remembers these things. Investors remember these things. Studios remember these things. Publicists remember these things. Every executive thinking about attaching millions of dollars to a celebrity project now has to ask whether the controversy is worth the risk. That changes careers. Maybe not immediately, but gradually. Slowly. Quietly. Doors stop opening as easily. Calls become less enthusiastic. Opportunities become more cautious. What fascinates me most about Ryan is how carefully he has controlled his image for years. He mastered the art of appearing self-deprecating while still dominating every room. He jokes constantly, but behind those jokes there's always branding. Every interview feels calculated. Every social media post feels managed. Even the humor became part of the business strategy. And for a long time it worked brilliantly. Audiences loved him because he seemed different from traditional Hollywood celebrities. He felt accessible. But the downside of crafting such a polished image is that eventually people begin noticing the performance itself. Once audiences start questioning authenticity, the charm weakens fast. That's why the backlash feels so intense now. It's not just about one controversy. It's about people reassessing the entire image they were sold. Suddenly old interviews feel different. Old behavior looks more manipulative. Old jokes stop feeling harmless. The public perception shifts, and once that shift begins it's very difficult to reverse. Blake faces a similar problem, though in a different way. For years she occupied this glamorous lifestyle queen position in celebrity culture. Fashion icon, red carpet favorite, admired marriage, successful actress, aspirational image. But there's always been criticism beneath the surface that she was overly curated, overly performative, overly image-conscious. The recent controversies amplified those criticisms massively. And now, instead of being viewed as polished and elegant, she's increasingly viewed by critics as disconnected, self-important, and out of touch. That kind of perception shift is devastating in Hollywood because the entertainment industry survives on emotional connection. Audiences need to want to root for you. The second audiences start feeling irritation instead of admiration, the atmosphere changes quickly. What I think is happening privately is far more complicated than the internet gossip suggests. I don't think Ryan and Blake are openly at war right now. I think they're trapped together inside a collapsing public narrative. There's a difference. They built so much of their empire jointly that separating emotionally becomes incredibly difficult. Their brands are intertwined. Their businesses are intertwined. Their public identities are intertwined. Their family image is intertwined. Untangling all of that would be extremely messy financially, emotionally, and professionally. So instead of dramatic public explosions, what you often see first in situations like this is quiet distance. Separate schedules. Fewer joint appearances. Increased time apart. Controlled public interactions. Strategic photographs. Carefully timed statements. Not because the marriage is healthy, but because both sides understand the value of maintaining appearances for as long as possible. Ryan spending increasing amounts of time in the UK has fueled a lot of speculation too. Some reports exaggerate. The reality is that Ryan and Blake are no longer viewed the way they were 5 years ago, and that shift alone changes the entire atmosphere around them. There was a period where they were almost untouchable in public perception. People saw them as funny, stylish, successful, attractive, wealthy, and somehow more relatable than other celebrity couples. Their interviews went viral for the right reasons. Their social media banter felt charming instead of calculated. Even when they were clearly promoting projects or building business visibility, audiences still enjoyed watching them. That goodwill acted like armor. Whenever criticism surfaced, fans immediately defended them because people emotionally invest in celebrity couples they admire. But now that armor has cracks everywhere, and once public trust weakens, old criticism resurfaces stronger than before. People start revisiting old interviews, old moments, old rumors, and suddenly the perception changes. What once looked witty starts looking arrogant. What once looked confident starts looking manipulative. That transition is brutal for celebrities because fame depends heavily on emotional projection. Audiences don't just consume entertainment, they consume personality. When the personality brand weakens, everything connected to it becomes unstable too. And honestly, I think Ryan underestimated how much resentment had quietly built against him over the years. He spent so long mastering the role of the charming, sarcastic guy that he probably assumed he could talk his way through any controversy. But eventually audiences grow tired of constant performance. There's a point where people stop seeing authenticity and start seeing strategy instead. Once viewers begin believing every joke, every appearance, and every interview is part of a calculated PR machine, they become cynical. That's where he is now. Instead of people automatically laughing with him, more people are questioning him. Instead of people instinctively defending him, more people are dissecting him. And for someone whose business empire depends on public affection, that's incredibly dangerous. Blake's situation is equally complicated because her career trajectory already carried pressure before all of this exploded publicly. Hollywood is notoriously unforgiving toward actresses once they reach a certain age bracket, especially actresses whose brands rely heavily on beauty, fashion, and public appeal. That doesn't mean Blake is old. She absolutely is not. But Hollywood executives constantly chase younger audiences and younger stars. The competition becomes harsher every year, especially for women. Blake likely saw It Ends With Us as a major career reestablishment moment. A chance to regain momentum, attract fresh opportunities, and reposition herself at the center of mainstream attention again. Instead, the entire situation spiraled into controversy, criticism, lawsuits, backlash, and reputational chaos. That kind of disappointment changes people psychologically. When someone believes they're about to relaunch themselves successfully and instead the opposite happens, frustration builds quickly. And if Ryan played a major role behind the scenes encouraging aggressive strategies, I can absolutely imagine resentment building privately now that the results turned disastrous. One thing people rarely talk about is how isolating celebrity scandal becomes. At first, everyone around you acts supportive. Publicists reassure you. Lawyers reassure you. Friends publicly defend you. But as months pass and controversy drags on, the atmosphere shifts. Some people quietly distance themselves. Some stop returning calls as quickly. Some avoid public association altogether. Hollywood relationships are heavily transactional whether people want to admit it or not. When your reputation becomes risky, people become cautious. That isolation can create enormous tension inside marriages because suddenly the spouse becomes both your closest ally and the easiest target for blame. If Blake privately believes Ryan escalated the situation unnecessarily, resentment grows. If Ryan privately believes Blake's behavior created the backlash, resentment grows. Neither person even has to say it directly. It sits underneath every interaction. And despite all the carefully managed public appearances, there are clear signs that both of them are operating in damage control mode rather than genuine confidence. You can see it in how calculated their visibility has become. You can see it in the selective appearances, the strategic photographs, the carefully timed stories pushed to tabloids, the attempts to redirect narratives. When celebrities are truly secure, they don't constantly need narrative management. The more aggressively a celebrity image gets managed, the more unstable things usually are behind the scenes. That's another reason I don't take these anonymous insider stories seriously anymore. Half the stories coming out lately feel like competing PR narratives rather than reality. One article paints Ryan as the calm strategic husband trying to stabilize everything while Blake spirals emotionally. Another paints Blake as the victim of overwhelming scrutiny while Ryan distances himself selfishly. Then another claims they're stronger than ever. Then another hints at secret tension. It's obvious that multiple narratives are being tested publicly to see what audiences respond to. That's standard Hollywood reputation management. Public perception becomes a chessboard. Stories get planted. Reactions get monitored. Adjustments get made. But here's the deeper issue. No amount of PR can permanently repair trust once audiences fundamentally change how they see you. That's the hardest lesson celebrities learn too late. Reputation isn't just about headlines. It's emotional momentum. Once people emotionally disconnect from a celebrity, rebuilding that connection becomes extremely difficult. And right now both Ryan and Blake are facing emotional disconnection from large portions of the audience that once adored them, that I also think there's a level of exhaustion between them that people underestimate. Imagine living under constant scrutiny while simultaneously managing lawsuits, financial concerns, career uncertainty, children, businesses, media attacks, online criticism, and endless speculation about your marriage. Even strong relationships would crack under that weight. Now add two extremely image-conscious personalities with large egos into the mix. Add resentment, add blame, add fear about the future. It becomes combustible. And that word keeps coming to mind when I think about them lately. Combustible. Not because they necessarily scream publicly or create dramatic scenes, but because the emotional environment surrounding them feels unstable. Everything around them feels volatile. Careers volatile. Public image volatile. Financial expectations volatile. Relationships volatile. I don't think divorce is necessarily imminent tomorrow, but I do think the foundation underneath their marriage has weakened significantly. And once that happens, every new controversy becomes heavier. Every bad headline lands harder. Every public criticism creates more stress privately. Over time, couples either rebuild trust together or they slowly begin emotionally separating while maintaining appearances publicly. Celebrity couples are especially skilled at maintaining appearances long after relationships emotionally collapse because there's simply too much money attached to staying together publicly. Look at how many celebrity couples appeared perfectly fine right until the divorce announcement. Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie looked untouchable until everything exploded. Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith spent years presenting one reality publicly while privately living another. Even couples who continue appearing together publicly can already be emotionally disconnected behind closed doors. That's why I laugh when fans insist photographs prove stability. Photographs prove nothing. Celebrities know how to pose. They know how to perform happiness. That's literally part of the profession. What makes Ryan and Blake particularly fascinating is that their relationship itself became part of their commercial value. Their humor together, their interviews together, their appearances together. It all reinforced their brand power. So if the marriage weakens, it doesn't just affect them emotionally. It affects the entire empire built around the image of them as a couple. That creates even more pressure to preserve appearances for as long as possible. That I also think Blake is facing a painful identity shift right now. For years she occupied a very specific position in celebrity culture. Admired wife, admired mother, admired fashion figure, successful actress, glamorous lifestyle personality. Suddenly much of that admiration has transformed into skepticism online. That kind of shift can deeply destabilize someone whose self-image depends heavily on public validation. And if she believes Ryan's strategies helped create the backlash, eventually that resentment becomes impossible to ignore. On the other side, Ryan likely sees himself as the master fixer who tried to protect everything and now feels frustrated that the damage keeps spreading anyway. Those emotional dynamics can quietly poison relationships over time. And despite all the stories claiming Ryan sees Blake as too polarizing, I think he knows perfectly well that his own reputation has taken major damage too. The idea that he somehow escaped untouched while only Blake became controversial is ridiculous. Public criticism toward him has intensified dramatically. People question his motives now. They question his personality now. They question whether the charming persona was ever genuine at all. That shift absolutely matters. At the end of the day, the biggest mistake people make is assuming celebrity marriages collapse suddenly. Usually they collapse gradually while the public keeps believing the performance. The emotional separation happens first. Then the strategic distance. Then the carefully managed coexistence. Then eventually one final breaking point arrives where maintaining the image becomes more exhausting than ending it. I think Ryan and Blake are somewhere in that middle stage right now, trying to preserve appearances while privately navigating enormous pressure neither expected would spiral this far. And honestly, I don't think either of them anticipated how permanent this reputational damage could become. Celebrity culture moves fast, but certain controversies leave lasting impressions. Once audiences associate your name with manipulation, lawsuits, PR games, or dishonesty, those associations linger. Even future successes get viewed through that lens. That's the trap they're in now. Everything they do gets interpreted suspiciously. Every interview gets analyzed. Every absence becomes gossip. Every appearance becomes strategic. That level of scrutiny slowly suffocates normal human connection. So no, I don't believe every tabloid narrative being pushed right now. I don't believe every conveniently timed insider story. But I absolutely believe this marriage is under enormous strain. I believe both of them are deeply invested in protecting themselves individually at this point. I believe their reputations, finances, businesses, and emotional stability are all tied together in ways that make the pressure even worse. And I believe that eventually one of them is going to decide the partnership no longer benefits them the way it once did. Because relationships built heavily around image can survive many things, but they struggle to survive mutual destruction. And right now that's exactly what this situation feels like. Two powerful personalities trapped inside a collapsing public narrative, both trying to save themselves while the empire they built together slowly cracks underneath them.